All right, like I said, there's a lot of different scriptures today. We're going to be moving around quite a bit. We're going to define some terms today. I think that terms are important. Last week when we went live, the Holy Spirit came on and we talked about love and what love really means. We talked about the perverted definition that the world has, where love just means accept everything. And then we talked about the biblical definition of what love is. And so today, we're going to also define some terms today.
Amen.
So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to define sin. I think it's important. People have the wrong impression of love, but they also have the wrong impression of sin. And I feel like where the Lord's been leading me at is, if you look at a lot of the churches, you hear Jesus preach, you hear salvation preached, and they tell you, you're lost, you need Jesus, you need to come up here and to pray. After that, they'll teach you about getting baptized, and it kind of stops at that point. And the problem is, when you get saved, what do you do after that? And I feel like that is where there's been a big problem in the American church, and I know that's what the Holy Spirit has put on me. So that's really what this is about today. At this point, if you live in the United States of America, you should know what it takes to be saved. So I'm talking today mainly, God's put on me that He's speaking to His people, and He's speaking to the backslider. And He's trying to get His word out to say, back to the basics. What is the biblical basics? Once we come to know the Messiah, and once we're filled with this Holy Spirit, what do we do after that? So the first thing, if we're talking about sin, we got to know what it is. And so I've asked people before, well, what would you say sin is? And I've heard all kinds of different definitions. And I've asked a lot of people, I say, well, what's the Bible's definition of sin? And a lot of people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that. And they don't know that the Bible actually defines sin. So that's where we're going to start at. We're going to go, let me find it here. We're going to go over to 1 John chapter 3. Now, the Bible that I'm reading out of, there's going to be times you're going to hear the word Adonai. What that is the Hebrew name that's translated for Lord. So that's all it is. In this Bible, they leave the Hebrew word. They don't translate it into English. So when you hear Adonai, there's no need to freak out. It's nothing weird. Chris ain't going off in some deep end on something. This is just the name that Jesus would have referred to His Father as. So that's what we're going to refer to Him as. So in 1 John chapter 3, let's see. Right here. We're going to start with verse 3. It says, and everyone who has this hope in Him continues purifying himself, since God is pure. Everyone who keeps sinning is violating the law. Indeed, sin is the violation of the law, or lawlessness. That's what lawlessness is. So, God tells you in His Word, in 1 John, that brother defined it. Sin is the breaking of God's law, His commandments. Jesus said, if you love me, He said, you'll keep my commandments. The Bible says that His commandments are not burdensome. And so when people try to distinguish, well, New Testament and Old Testament, and what they act like Jesus was some hippie and God was some evil dictator in the Old Testament, and not understanding Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Every word from Genesis to Revelation was Jesus. It says that He was the Word made flesh. So there is no difference. He said, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever, and I changed not. Amen. The difference is we changed Him. Yeah. God originally in the garden created man in His image, but we now in the 21st century have created God in our image, and we've changed Him. And He said in the last days that man would be high-minded. And if you look up what high-minded means, it means to be a form of arrogance where you only serve a God existing in your mind. And that's what we've done. We've created a God in our mind that's a feel-good God. It's a God that's the strong delusion that's being preached out there, where it says, do whatever you will. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And Jesus loves you no matter what. Don't judge, don't condemn. And they take parts that they misquote, and they twist this whole big, long word of God, so that people then feel that once they come to know Messiah and they come to know Jesus, that they can go out then and they can commit sin and do things, and that they're okay for it. There was a meme that my daughter shared with me once I thought was kind of funny but still true. It said something like, I asked God for a bike, but I know He don't work like that, so I went and stole one and I asked Him for forgiveness instead. And that's kind of how He's been preached, right? That, yeah. It's like, well, if you don't like, go break a sin, just go say your Hail Marys and pray about it, and He'll forgive you and you're going to be good to go. And that is not how it works. So, Amen. The first definition of sin, violation of God's laws, His commandments. That is what sin is. So now we're going to talk about covenant. And when you get saved, what that even means. We throw that term saved around very, very loosely. The same way we throw love around, the same way we water sin down, we throw that down very loosely. So when you come to know the Messiah, you are grafted in, the Bible says, to Israel. Jew and Gentile, one in the Messiah. It says He's the cornerstone. And anybody who's did any kind of masonry work understands what a cornerstone is. Because a cornerstone takes two separate walls that without the cornerstone are completely separate. But when you put that cornerstone in, it secures both walls. And with the cornerstone, those two walls become one. That's what the job of a cornerstone is. Jesus, it says, was the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected, has now become the chief cornerstone. Well, those builders, you got to remember, the Jews, this is where this came from, right? God spoke to Abraham, who was a Hebrew. He went on to have Abraham. You had Isaac, you had Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. His children was the 12 tribes, the 12 children he had. That is then what those who were from the tribe of Judah were called Jews. Then the Romans pretty much started calling all Hebrews Jews. That's where that term comes from. So he says salvation is to the Jew first, then to the Gentile, right? So there was these two bodies of people. You had covenant people who God made a covenant with Abraham. And He said, I will bless you. He said, I'll bless your descendants and I will multiply you, right? Now, he did this while Abraham was uncircumcised. Abraham was the first uncircumcised person to know the Lord. Then God entrusted him with circumcision, made a covenant with him there. No condition on that. Just trust. Because Abraham believed Him. Now, Abraham had to do some stuff to prove it, though. He later had to go offer Isaac up. God said it ain't just a belief. We also have to define the term faith. Because people don't know what faith is. We act like faith is a belief to say, well, if you believe in Jesus, you're good. No, faith it's a formula. Belief plus works equals faith.
Yeah, amen.
Faith is a verb. It's an action word. You're doing something with faith. It's not just a belief, because James says, you don't hear James preach much from the church no more. That brother seems to get the Bible shut on him. But he said faith without works is dead.
Yeah, amen.
Being alone. He said you believe there's one God. He said you do well. But even the demons in hell, he said, believe and tremble at His name. So we know demons aren't being saved. But they believe Jesus is the Son of God. They believe that God is one. The Shema that we sang earlier, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The demons know that. The demons can confess that. The demons aren't going to be saved. Belief plus works equals faith. That's what the whole book of James is about. So that's part of covenant. Covenant is something where that it's a two-party system, and both people agree to something like a contract. And there's a part that God says, these are the things I'll do, and He said, these are the things I expect from you. So that's what we're going to go into today. But the problem is, the church, we act like it's some new entity that Jesus came to create. And that's the problem. We're like, well, Israel's the Old Testament. The church is the New Testament, and we don't understand that what church even means. It's just a word that was translated that means assembly, the congregation, the body, same as what Israel was called. If you look at the word in the Hebrew in the Old Testament, when He referred, it was the congregation, that He referred to. Same thing. So congregation's called something in the Old Testament. It's called church in the New Testament. The difference is all these Gentiles that were out here, all of us who weren't born Jewish, we were lost without any hope. We had no covenant. We were pagans, worshiping everything under the sun that you could think of. That's what our ancestors did. Until they came to know the Jewish Messiah, who taught them there's one God, and there's only one way, and that's through the Messiah. But He was the Jewish Messiah first. Then He brought us in so that we could have covenant. That's a big deal, understanding what covenant is. So I say that so that I can read these scriptures and it'll make a little more sense as we go into it. So in Romans chapter 11, starting at verse 16, he says, now if the challah offered as first fruits is holy, so is the whole loaf. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, talking about Gentiles here, he said, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them, and have become equal sharers in the rich root of the olive tree. So, my background is in horticulture. So, a lot of people don't understand what grafting a plant is. So, in horticulture, what we do is you'll have a plant, and you can look at a plant and say, okay, that one's very disease resistant. That means it's got a very strong root. So usually disease resistance has to do with the root of a plant. The fruit has to do with the stem and the leaves. So you can look at two plants and say, well, that one has really good fruit, but it's not very disease resistant. The root's not very strong. And you can look at the other plant and say, that one never gets the disease, but it has small fruit. So what you do is you take the root, the plant with the good root, you cut it at an angle on the stem, take off all the fruit and the leaves, let it fall to the ground. You go over here to the tree that bears the good fruit. You cut the part with the fruit, and you graft it together, and you wrap it up, and you leave it sit there. And after about a week or so, or more, depending on what the plant is, it'll callus and it'll harden up. That plant becomes one. And after time, it's hard to tell anymore where the old plant begins and the new plant ends, and they become one in there. And that callus is strong. And that plant bears much fruit, and it has disease resistance. So it says that the root is Judaism. That was our root, right? That's what Paul says on there. But yet, he looked at that and said, okay, these are the prophets. This is Moses, this is David, this is everybody before you. That's your root, Abraham, the men of faith. Now, he said, I'm going to graft in, and we're going to have on here Gentiles, and we're going to have Jews that believe in Jesus that come together as one. Now, there's Jews that don't believe in Jesus. Those Jews, it says, that don't believe, those branches were broke off because of unbelief. He said, but don't get arrogant and think, well, I got grafted in and they've got, blindness and all these things that have happened. He said, if God didn't spare the natural branches, he said, he will not spare you either.
Amen.
That's something we need to remember. All this once and grace garbage out there,
yeah, amen.
God would, if he did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Because there's no favoritism with God. Right. We're grafted in, Jew and Gentile, one in the Messiah, strong root, disease resistant, and good fruit. That's the point of grafting. So that's understand that part. Then we're going to go over to Ephesians to kind of bring this point home before we go in and we talk about the words of the covenant. So in Ephesians chapter 2, starting at verse 11, he says, therefore remember your former state, you Gentiles by birth, called the uncircumcised, by those who merely because of an operation on their flesh are called the circumcised. At that time you had no Messiah. You were estranged from the national life of Israel. You were foreigners to the covenants, embodying God's promise. And you were in this world without hope and without God. That's what we forget. Yeah. That he said who once were called Gentiles. He's making a distinction here. Because once you were Gentiles, you were lost, you were pagans, your ancestors were lost and pagans, you didn't know God, you had no hope, but you were strangers, you were foreigners, but you're not no more. He's saying now you are a part of Israel, the national life, you're not estranged, you're not foreigners anymore, you're part of the covenant, you're part of covenant people. So now that we know that we were lost, we know what sin is, it's the violation of God's law, we know what it means to be saved means that we enter into covenant. Now we just have to figure out, well, what is this covenant that we've entered into? Okay, it's great. We're now one like Israel, Jew and Gentile, one in the Messiah. But what's that mean now? What is expected of me? And what is expected of God in this covenant? And that is where we're going to now.